I'm happy to see we've got a decent, sizable audience to come and talk to us today about the future of free-to-air television in the digital age. It's something that's been ongoing for a very long time. I think those of us that have been involved in this project have lost count. Probably about 20 years, this BDM project has been an ongoing, initially, touted as a huge opportunity for free-to-air television services, which we'll talk through just now. But increasingly, as time has gone on, there have been many, many challenges with the BDM project, the Broadcast Digital Migration. And sorry, I'm going to use a lot of acronyms. So before we even go further into the discussion, I'm actually going to ask one of the panelists really just to kind of orientate ourselves about what this is all about so we can sort of understand this very highly complex issue of the broadcast digital migration and the analog switch off. And more importantly, I think for us, we want to look at this issue from the point of view, from the public interest point of view, because the free-to-air television system is really, I think primarily the largest audience on free-to-air TV is working class communities and the majority of citizens who still rely on access to free-to-air TV services for actually most of their information. So very often when we talk to people from this kind of audience, the automatic response that you get from people is, oh, well, people don't watch television anymore. That's actually not the case, and we will be looking at that as well. The majority of people in South Africa are very reliant on free-to-air television for their information. So this is a huge issue for the majority of people in South Africa, but it's also an issue that's relevant to the independent production sector. Because as we will discover today in some of the talks that we'll be doing here, is that this is now in fact presenting an existential threat to the future of public and community broadcasting, or shall I say free-to-air public interest broadcasting in South Africa, which is a really big deal. So the stakes are very, very high. And we're asking people, often when I talk to people about this stuff, their eyes sort of glaze over and they go, oh, is that still really going to happen? We don't believe this is going to happen anymore. But this is a particularly important time because the switch off of analog television is actually still scheduled to take place before the end of December. And yes, this time we are serious. It may happen. We're hoping that it's not going to happen. But, as I said, the stakes are very, very high. So it's very important that citizens of South Africa and the television industry is aware of what is going on and actually is engaged with this and participates in these discussions. Because, as I said, the threats are very real. And, of course, the opportunities are also very real, and that's something that we mustn't lose sight of. So that's just the introduction, and I'm going to hand over to my panel, and I'm just going to do a brief introduction. Sorry, time is very limited, so I won't ask you to introduce yourselves, because I know how the temptation is to talk about ourselves. So I'll just briefly introduce, firstly, on my right is Dimitri Martinis. He's the CEO of MCM Digital Media, and he's worked in the media and broadcasting sector for the past 35 years in the public and private sector and on various projects, including the digital switchover. Immediately to his right is Uyanda Siyotula, who is the national coordinator of the SOS Coalition, the Save Our SABC Coalition, who have been very, very actively involved in advocating to save and protect public service broadcasting in South Africa, and is really bringing in the voice of civil society as well as independent producers and independent academics and lawyers and policy specialists in this field. And then sitting next to Uyanda is Dr. Fhatuwani Mutuvhi. Sorry about that. He's the Chief Director of the Broadcasting Digital Migration Project in the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. We really appreciate you traveling down to Cape Town to be part of this panel. And then on the far right is Mike Aldridge, who is the Cape Town TV's broadcast manager, and is also a broadcasting specialist. And then perhaps I should also introduce myself. My name is Karen Thorne. I'm one of the founders and the station manager of Cape Town TV, and I've also been involved in this project from the very, very beginning, and it's been a long journey. And also just to welcome all of you to this platform. So first of all, I'm going to just ask Dimitri, as quickly as possible, just to kind of take us through and frame this issue for us and just demystify and try and simplify. I think one of the problems with the BDM project is that it's so complex, just from a technological point of view, never mind the policy and regulation, that it's quite difficult for a lot of people to understand. And because of the complexity of it, it sort of becomes shrouded in mystery, and people don't really know how to engage with this very important issue. So I'm going to ask Dimitri just to help demystify this for us. Thanks, Dimitri.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Karen. We've heard so many acronyms thrown about, including BDM. It's not some kind of new sex kink. We've heard OTT. We've heard digital. Like, what's digital? How many of you wear a watch on your wrist? Has it got arms? If it does, it's analog. If it's not, it's digital. I quite like this quote, technology is the campfire around which we tell our stories. And I think that's what it's about, broadcasting, film production, it's about telling stories. And technology is not separate from telling stories. Straight into disruptive technologies, you've probably all heard of Airbnb, Uber, Netflix. Increase in these new technologies really is disrupting so many different industries. If you look at these different brands, what you've got here is how long it took to reach 1 million viewers or users. Netflix took 3.5 years. ChatGPT took 5 days to reach 1 million users. We talk about a hype cycle. Is DTT in one of these cycles? Are we moving through what starts off as a technology trigger at the bottom, and then we have a peak inflated expectations. DTT is going to do everything. We're going to be cooking, making coffee as well with these little set-top boxes in our. We then go through the trough of disillusionment. I think that's where we are at the moment, and hopefully we're moving up the slope of enlightenment to a plateau of productivity. Okay, so streaming is not broadcasting. Streaming is a point-to-point as a point-to-multi-point. That's what broadcasting is. So as I speak, all of you can hear me at the same time. That's broadcasting. Whereas streaming is something I have to go and fetch. I have to open up a single line of communication. Like a perfect example why we need regulation and sort out these frequency things. We can hear everybody else in this arena. And by the way, guys, if you want to get, there are some headsets which help to block out the noise if you want to. There are a few headsets around. Just raise your hand. And so that's quite important. Point-to-point streaming is essentially an on-demand service. You go out, whereas broadcasting is something that is offered to all people at the same time. That's the internet. Any to many. Anyone can put on content and be received right across. Convergence. Very, very briefly, you've got industries that were previously separate. Telecommunications, where you used to just make a phone call, we can now deliver video over networks that were developed for point-to-point. The spectrum thing. This is why we're doing this whole thing. Okay, so the different colors that you see there, what we call a spectrum, a band, a frequency spectrum band. You want to make sure that you can see that in this space, the yellow there, the mustard color, previously a television channel would take up an entire frequency there. In the same space, we can slot in up to maybe 6 or 8 HD channels. That's one of the big benefits of digital. Right, how do we get our content to our consumers? There are only 3 ways, right? One of 3. You can use cable. You can see that we have cable that goes around the continent and that connects us to the rest of the world. Satellite. Basically, a satellite is a transmitter in the sky. Like the moon is a satellite of planet Earth, we have satellites that are orbiting the Earth, and they serve to cover large areas, right? That's called a satellite footprint. So you would have that, let's say, Southern Africa covered by the satellite footprint. Okay. To go or 3 minutes done? Okay. So there's your TV and your radio studio. You have a point-to-point link one way, right? It goes up to the satellite and then down to households or other production facilities. That's a terrestrial. So now this is a transmitter on land. This is where digital terrestrial television comes in. So you need a transmitter that can cover a very wide area. And that's called the terrestrial footprint. When we talk about free-to-air television, we talk about television that can be delivered over either a terrestrial or a satellite a platform. Those are the devices that you need. DTH is your satellite, direct to home. DTT, you need a little rooftop antenna like that. Many people already have that, and they might be able to continue using it. But you're going to need a little set-top box to continue receiving a signal. Mike will be talking a bit more about it later. What are people using to receive their news, etc.? More and more people are using these devices. This is not broadcasting, right? A very important part, Corin spoke about, public interest. Essentially, what we're talking about is journalism as a public good, public service media as a public good. What is a public good? It's available to everyone, and it's not rivalrous. It's not in a competitive environment. That's what's happened to SABC's viewers over time. Since we've started switching off from 2019, you've just seen them plummeting. What does that mean? Audiences down, 1.5 million audiences, which means revenue down. Less revenue, less money for your productions. Less investment in original South African content. The reputation of the SABC goes down. Public trust, down. We don't pay our TV licenses. Where's all the money going? Internet. TV, plummeting. I'm not going to take too much time, but you can see that your top channels, ETV among those as a commercial channel, but they're all the SABC's channels. Top streamers, done. If YouTube was a TV channel, it would be the largest. And I'm going to end with this. We have 4.3 million households that currently view television in analog. They don't have a set-top box. They don't have an open view decoder. They don't have a DSTV decoder. If we switch off on the 31st of December, all of those households, not audiences, that's that many households. So multiply by 4. People will have no access to TV, no access to your content. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. That is the tip of the iceberg, but I hope that sort of familiarizes everyone with some of the terminology that we're going to be talking about today. Things are going to hot up a little bit now because we're going to ask Mike to really just talk through what has gone wrong with the broadcast digital migration that makes us all very concerned today And after that, Fhatuwani is going to just come from the department's point of view and just respond to some of the things that Mike has brought up and look at how pointing in some direction in terms of the way forward. So Mike, over to you. What's been going on?
Okay, so so the broadcast digital migration has been taking place in South Africa since 2008. So we're 17 years later, we still haven't really completed it. In 2015, the South African government, under direction of the cabinet, decided to make free set-top boxes or DTT decoders available to low-income households in South Africa, which was obviously a very good move, because otherwise those households would really struggle to be able to continue watching television, because many of those households in the poorer sectors of our population still have analog TV sets. So if you have an analog TV set, the only way that you will be able to continue watching television after the analog switch off is if you have a set-top box or a DTT decoder. So two terms for one device. Alternatively, you would need to have another digital platform. So, for example, DSTV or OpenView or StarSat. So while it was a very good move on the part of the South African government to make these set-top boxes available to poor households, there have been a number of problems in rolling those set-top boxes out. So initially, a government commissioned the manufacture of 1.5 million of these set-top boxes. And so that was back in 2015. We are still in the process of rolling those set-top boxes out. So in order for a poor household to get a set-top box, they have to register. So they have to fill in a form, and these forms were only available at post offices. Now we know that many post offices in South Africa have closed down, which now then limits the access of those people to get their set-top boxes, particularly in rural areas where, if you don't have a post box in a local post office in a rural area, then where the hell do you go to register? Other problems include the fact that because these boxes were manufactured in 2015, they are quite old technology now. They are kind of obsolete, and many of them do have problems. So there was a problem with the technical specifications in terms of the kind bandwidth that the boxes can receive. And there are many of these boxes which are faulty and had to be returned. Relatively recently, I think it was about 2018 or perhaps later, Dr. Mutuvhi can tell us, but then government realized that, okay, maybe there weren't enough set-top boxes in the market, and they commissioned the manufacture of more set-top boxes, but this time, instead of it being the DTT boxes to pick up the terrestrial transmissions, they were DTH boxes to pick up the transmission from satellite. So, however, even if all of those free boxes are rolled out, so you're talking about 1.75 million boxes in all, more or less, that only makes up a fraction of the total free-to-air TV market. So in 2023, I think that the total free-to-air market was about 5.6 million households. The total television households in South Africa as a whole is around 14.5 million. DSTV has about 55% share of the market. So of those 14.5 million, there were around 5.6 million free-to-air households. In other words, households picking up their television from analog terrestrial transmission. So even if all the free set-top boxes are rolled out, there's still a sizable proportion of the free-to-air market who do not have those set-top boxes. There are no set-top boxes available in the retail market. You cannot go to Game or Macro or Hi-Fi Corporation and buy a DTT set-top box. They are simply not there. The reason for that is because the retailers refuse to stock them because they said, well, without a demand, then people aren't going to buy these boxes and they're going to sit on our shelves, and we don't want that situation to happen. So, so there have been shortages in, there no set-top boxes available in the retail market. What that means for your television viewer is that the only way they can pick up that DTT signal is if they have an integrated digital TV set. In other words, a digital TV set with a built-in tuner that can pick up that DTT signal. So we don't know the exact numbers of digital TV sets available in the market. Cape Town TV has been broadcasting on digital and analog transmission for the past 2 years, and we haven't seen a really appreciable uptake or increase in our audience. So in the analog environment, we're transmitting from one transmitter on Tygerberg. In the digital environment, we're transmitting on 12 transmitters around the greater Cape Town area. So despite the increase in the size of our broadcast footprint, it hasn't translated into an increase in viewers. So simply being on the digital transmission hasn't brought us very many additional viewers. So this is obviously a huge problem for us. As a broadcaster, we are very, very worried that when the analog signals are switched off, a large part of our audience, which is about 30 to 40% of our total audience, because Cape Town TV is also national on DSTV. So we stand to lose as much as 40% of our audience, which will be a devastating blow for the station. As public service broadcasters, we are worried that many people in South Africa will then no longer be able to get TV at all. So, as I say, the only mechanisms now for people to be able to continue watching television after the analog switch off is if they have a digital TV set with a built-in tuner, if they have a DTT or DTH set-top box provided by Centec, or if they go to one of the commercial platforms like DSTV or OpenView. As public service broadcasters, we are not comfortable with the idea that the public has to get their free-to-air television from a commercial platform. So even while OpenView is the kind of cheaper option, because you only have to pay for the set-top box, which is about 1,200 Rand, we are concerned that many poorer households might not be able to afford that. An additional problem for us is that OpenView carries no community TV channels and no SABC channels. So it means all of those people who are migrating to OpenView will not be able to get community TV or SABC. So a big problem for us and big problem for the people who would actually like to have public service TV. So digital broadcasting has ushered in particular problems for us as community broadcasters. In the analog environment, we hired just one transmitter from Centec, and we pay for that one transmitter. In the digital environment, now we have to pay for 12 transmitters initially, and because the DTT transmission is the architecture of that network. It's structured as a single frequency network, which means that all of the transmitters in the network broadcast on exactly the same frequency, which means, according to some, that our signal has to be on all of the transmitters or none of the transmitters. We can't localize that footprint to just one transmitter as in our analog environment. So what that means for us is it pushes up our transmission costs because we have to hire those transmitters from Centec. It pushes up our transmission costs by 2,900%. Okay, so from paying around 70,000 Rand a month for one transmitter, we're supposed to pay now 1.8 million Rand a month for 34 transmitters across the whole of the Western Cape. This is completely unaffordable for us. There is absolutely no way that a small non-profit organization can afford those kind of transmission costs. So there has to be a solution found to that problem. The other problem for us is obviously the loss of audience. So something needs to be done. From my perspective, the single biggest reason why this whole DTT migration has not worked is that because in this digital environment, from the consumer's point of view, the consumer has to make a decision as to which platform they are going to choose. Are they going to choose DSTV? Are they going to go for Mnet? Are they going to go for OpenView? Are they going to go for DTT? Or are they going to go for Centec's DTH platform, which is called FreeVision? Now the problem is that Centec does not market the FreeVision satellite platform. It does not provide set-top boxes for that platform. So when it's competing against these other players like DSTV and OpenView who do provide these devices, obviously there's a huge problem because even if consumers want to get FreeVision, A, they don't know about FreeVision because it's not marketed, and B, even if they want to get a set-top box, they cannot get a set-top box unless they go to a very specialist retailer that can provide them. So there are no Centec DTH boxes available to the general public. There are no DTT boxes available to the general public, as I've mentioned. So what this suggests is that technology is forcing Centec to shift from being a business-to-business transmission provider to a consumer-facing business-to-consumer organization that provides consumers with set-top boxes for its DTH and DTT transmission platforms, which services those boxes, which has a helpline to help people when they have problems setting them up. Maintaining those boxes. The existing boxes in the market have not been maintained. There's been no software updates for the past 9 years since 2015.
Mike, can you
This
start
is a
wrapping
huge
up?
problem. So as a broadcaster, we are very, very afraid of this analog switch off, which is coming in just 4 months' time at the end of this year. And we are very concerned that many people in South Africa, particularly among the poorer sectors, will be cut off from receiving television broadcasts. So we're very worried, and we're looking to Dr. Mutuvhi to help us out of this. And of course, Centec. Centec has to be reformed, in my view, or transformed, let me say, rather than reformed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I hope your eyes aren't starting to glaze over, and I think that's probably just given you a real sense of, as I said earlier on, the existential threat that this now poses to the future of free-to-air TV in South Africa. Before we go to Fhatuwani to respond to this, and I know Fhatuwani's got a lot to say, I just want to go to Uyanda first, because I think it's good for her just to kind of bring this issue home to us as citizens first and foremost, and obviously as producers and also as broadcasters, how does this impact on South Africans?
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Thank you very much, Karen. And I think you put it very well when you said I'm a voice of civil society. And I think before I answer your question, I would just like to briefly speak about how our organization is structured. So we're a coalition of different organizations, including organizations like SASFED, like the IPO, that really represent the industry. So I just want to kind of validate, where I'm coming from. So I think, the impact that this analog switch off is going to have on the industry, we really need to come back and look at the importance of the SABC, because the work that we do as SAS really revolves around the public broadcaster, because we believe that it is an important, institution that really actually is a vehicle for local content that, people in the room as producers actually produce. So when the SABC is not sustainable, that, really just impacts the sustainability of the industry. Because if you actually look at the SABC's mandate, it is mandated, in fact, to, carry local content, basically. If you look at its local content quotas, according to the TV, ICASA's content, TV regulations, it's supposed to carry 65% of local content. So when the SABC is not sustainable, what you actually see is that it's not able to commission local content. That means producers are not eating, and the whole value chain in the industry is actually impacted. But if the SABC is strengthened and supported, it's able to then be able to commission local content and meet its own local quotas, and really just be the voice of our own stories as South Africans. Because I think also what we need to be mindful of is the fact that the SABC as a public broadcaster has got a broader mandate. It's supposed to tell our South African stories, it's supposed to really unite us as South Africans, preserve our identity, and that can only be done through local content stories that gives a voice to various South Africans. I think as a coalition, that's why we also care so much about the SABC. And I will speak broadly about free-to-air television just now. But I think we care so much because of the impact it has on entrenching our constitutional values. If you look at the right of freedom of expression, the right of access to information, the SABC is freely accessible. It is available across the country in various, South African languages, and really it does become, a vehicle that allows every South African to access information, but also it becomes a platform for us to have a voice as South Africans. And I think when the analog switch off then happens, at the end of this year, on the 31st of December, the greater impact is that the SABC will continue to lose audiences. I think Dimitri spoke to this earlier and said loss of audiences translates directly to loss of revenue. I think that really is the biggest threat for the industry. But I think because we are a public interest organization, we also value, access of information for the public, because when people don't have access to information, they're not informed. They're not able to make informed decisions. They're not able to fully participate, in our democracy. And I think that role is carried heavily by the SABC as a public broadcaster, but also by free-to-air television, because it's freely accessible. It allows people to get information and be able to make those, important, decisions that really impact their lives. And I think, really we need to look at the impact from the from the perspective of producers, from the perspective of broadcasters that are going to continue to lose their audiences. If you look at the SABC, already in the previous, switch off, where 5 provinces, the smaller provinces were switched off, including Free State, Northern Cape, and all those smaller ones, it lost 40% of its audience. And if the analog switch off happens at the end of December, it's going to lose a whole lot more. That means the industry is going to be heavily impacted. People in South Africa are going to be heavily impacted. I think that's why we take this so seriously as a coalition. And I think I would really just like everyone here today to be alive to the impact of the analog switch off. We're actually running a campaign. Hopefully I'll get a chance to speak about that, later on, because I think as much as we're here to talk about these problems, we also need to come up with solutions and stand up, as a country and fight this beast for all our industries and our public broadcaster, as well as free-to-air television, at large, to be sustainable.
Thank you so much, Uyanda. Fhatuwani, I really feel like we've put you on a spot here. And so we'd really love to hear from the department, how you are responding to some of these challenges. And also just give us a sense of what is the way forward? What could be some of the solutions that we could work together with the Department of Communications to try and address some of these very dire consequences that we've been talking about in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen and colleagues. I think giving a background about where the program started will assist everyone here. After realizing a need, the government made commitment to provide subsidy or to assist the poor household through the scheme of ownership. And amongst other critical aspects was for government to ensure that there is awareness campaigns raised, which started in 2015. The second was to ensure that those households are identified and they come forth and register. So the impact of what we are talking about now should be considering what the government has committed to do, whether the government is doing that or not. And in this regard, between 2015 and 2019, when we started to test or pilot the switch off of transmitters, we were ensuring that the decoders are available for connecting the poor households. We were raising awareness with all stakeholders, including SABC, TV, MultiChoice, and them. Only in 2019, when we realized that the thinking of the target of 5 million, which we had as government at the time, was not showing any increase in terms of the uptake, registration uptake. The thinking was that people might have migrated through other means, either through OVHD, MultiChoice, and so forth. We switched off a transmitter in Senegal, and we put infrastructure in place, decoders and everybody in place to guard against any reactions. If my memory serves me well, we only had 804 households that reacted, and 90% of those were saying, we are aware of the switch off that has happened. We are on the entry level of MultiChoice, but we cannot afford. We have realized these things are working, and we want to register. We registered them, we converted them. Fast forward 2019, the Meta Mike made mention of the government has made commitment to subsidize through the DTH, the direct to home, and the terrestrial. And at the time, there was a slow of supply from one of the service provider. But fast forward to the current situation, there was experience that we learned as government that the engagement maybe was narrow. We broadened this engagement last year when we switched off the transmitters or made the determination for the two-step approach. There was that consideration. But important also to bring to the attention of the listeners here is that South Africa has missed the deadline for ITU since 2015, June. Until 2022, our frequencies were not protected. The question is about the reputation of the government. What is it that the government would have done had we happened to be switched off forcefully by your neighboring countries? It was another aspect of consideration for government. But In 2022, when the government sat and engaged with the executive authorities, we realized a need of engaging, embracing all stakeholders to participate in the program, to receive inputs into the decisions that the government had to take. And there was a consensus for community broadcasters, for free-to-air broadcaster SABC and ETV, as well as the multi-choice and them, to say we have missed the deadlines. Our frequencies above 694 are not protected. Let us switch off those transmitters. You would also agree with me that we even retuned some other transmitters in other provinces, like Limpopo, provinces where switch off had happened. We retuned them to broadcast below 694. And we agreed, let us go back, let us elevate awareness campaign, let's open the registration campaign so that those who are who have not registered are able to participate in the program and the benefit. I can tell you now that the average of registration since August 2023 to July 2024, it's sitting at 2,800. There was a consideration by the broadcasters that the post offices were closing. We agreed to that. We then deployed from the department point of view, even through support of other entities, people across the country to drive awareness campaign. We have appointed broadcasters, including community broadcasters, to elevate the awareness campaign so that everybody, this message can reach your consumers. The question that arises from the number we hear every time is the 4.8 million. And we ask the question, where are these people? We have developed an online system that is managed through CETA, and that is operational, much as we acknowledge that there was a delay of about 4 to 6 months on the application, but the application is the application is in place, the online platform is in place. We are still not getting the numbers as we hear from the broadcasters and other stakeholders. I want to reiterate that the government is committed to install households that come forth and say we are indigent households and we want to register. The government has also, in engagement with the stakeholders, including broadcasters, encouraged them to engage with the manufacturers and suppliers of these devices, to partner with them so that they can create their own brand, lift it up and say we are Cape TV and this is the brand you can run to, so that we can massify the supply of these decoders. Much as we acknowledge the issues of the delay that has happened, from where we are sitting, our work is informed by the numbers that we look at, and that is those that have registered, we will ensure that they are connected, either now or tomorrow, and that is what we are doing. We have appointed through the model, Centec is procuring decoders, and they are being delivered. So the stakeholders that we have, including broadcasters, are participating into this program. And we are of the view and believe that if there are any other issues and any challenges, we have a boardroom, we have established engagement platforms with the broadcasters where these issues can be raised. From where I'm sitting, I understand from the stakeholders that there is a call or request for a steering committee to be convened. In the engagement and on an ongoing basis, we are providing feedback about the progress in relation to that. We have, for an example, in closing, Chair, the data for the registrations that we have, because of the, I don't want to say illiteracy, but it relates to that, where forms completed does not indicate where Mutuvhi stays. It says this person comes from Miri village. And you know, in your rural setting, you don't have street numbers, you don't have house numbers, something like that. So that's the data that we're cleaning so that we can, Centec has given us a plan of installation towards December, so that all those households that have registered can then be installed. But we are not saying we'll find all of them. We have put mechanisms in place through engagement with district, local municipalities, and traditional leadership. We understand Malone Finis comes from this area, but we don't have the street name, and they're assisting us. So I think what we need to understand here is that much as there are challenges, the government is doing something to resolve them. Secondly, and lastly, we are working as a team, and from the engagement and the outcomes of and the resolution that was taken to have the two-step approach, we worked together to switch off the transmitters above 694 as a team. We still continue to work as stakeholders, and the government has embraced this engagement to take place in a manner that assists us to achieve what we want to achieve. If there are any issues, the government is open to listen to what the stakeholders are saying through the platforms created to deal with that. Lastly, Chair, stakeholders across the country are encouraged to assist indigent households to register. Broadcasters are encouraged to engage where necessary with providers of these decoders so that they can have their branded devices. The government encourages everybody here to assist us if there are any areas where you know people have registered but they have not been connected. Raise a hand and say, this area people have registered but they have not been connected. And we respond to that. We're a very small team, but we respond to those through ourselves, through broadcasters, and through any other stakeholders. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think it's very clear to me, and I'm sure to our audience today, that everything that Mike has spoken about and that Fhatuwani has really reiterated, that the challenges are enormous. Obviously, there is work being done. We know that because we're part of the committee that meets on a weekly basis to get updates on progress and so on. So yes, there is work being done. But what I fail to understand is, what is the rush? What's the rush to switch off? And no one's really been able to answer that question convincingly to me, because there have been reports in the media, like on platforms like Tech Central and so on, that we need to free up spectrum to auction off to the telcos, whereas in fact that's not the case at all. That's already been done. All the broadcasters have already been migrated to below 694 megahertz. And that is spectrum that is reserved for broadcasting purposes. That's our spectrum. That's not for the telcos. And we are also aware that many countries in Africa have retained analog broadcasting for precisely the reasons that we are concerned about, which is that many people are poor. They can't afford the entry-level price of 4,000 Rand for a digital TV set or DVTV set. And there's no set-top boxes available for these people. So I still don't understand why it is necessary. Of course, we always hear the ITU set a deadline. We passed that deadline 9 years ago. So extending it by another 6 months in the interests of 4.5 million citizens who will wake up one morning to turn their TV sets on and there will be nothing there. I don't buy that argument. So what is the rush? Another issue that we haven't really looked at on this panel is the fact that we've been operating in a context or an environment of policy uncertainty for many, many years now. We've had something like 3 aborted policy review processes for the AAVCS policy. ICASA has recently actually started a DTT regulation review process where they're re-looking at the 7 MUX plan. Like, what are we actually doing with DTT? No one can answer that question. So it's not as if that spectrum has now been licensed to private operators and now they've got a contract and they're waiting to launch, commercial stations. There is no rush. this spectrum has been allocated to free-to-air TV services. We are all saying as community and public broadcasters that we are not ready to switch off our transmitters, that this could potentially collapse free-to-air television in South Africa. And so recognizing that, we are calling for a moratorium on the switching off of any further analog transmission until at least the policy and regulatory framework has been finalized. And we know what the future of the 7 Max plan is, if in fact there's any such thing. So I'm going to leave it at that because we've only got a couple of minutes left, because I also want to see if there's any questions from the audience. I just quickly want to ask, Fhatuwani, you've already pointed to some of the solutions going forward, which is working together with the broadcasters, opening up channels of conversation and consultation. Briefly, if I could just hear from Uyanda and Mike and Dimitri if they want to add anything, and you can also add, but please just everyone keep it really short because we're now over time.
After the questions.
So, no, we'll go with the solutions and then we'll come to the questions. So really less than a minute each just to propose solutions, starting with you, Mike.
Okay, so for me, as I've said, the only realistic way forward for digital broadcasting or public service digital broadcasting, free-to-air broadcasting in South Africa is for Centec to transform, for Centec to take up its responsibility to provide set-top boxes to the public, for its free vision satellite platform, which reaches the whole country with all of the available channels, and also, if DTT is to survive, to provide DTT boxes as well. So in my book, it's all up to Centec at the end of the day. Thanks.
Fhatuwani?
Yeah, a response to why the rush. I'm not saying we must rush, but we also have to take into account that government does not have unlimited resources. As we speak currently, the government is responsible for the forking out of the dual illumination cost. Broadcasters are not paying for that. The government is paying for that. So we also have to be cognizant of that. The rush is not government. It's what the stakeholders have agreed upon in the engagement that has happened in the last year with the minister. That is what
We've never been
the reason
consulted.
behind gazetting, a resolution towards gazetting was part of the stakeholder engagement. And this is a prerogative of the minister. And the minister has opened, or the government has opened their hands to say, through this conversation and engagement that we're having, let us engage. And I'm still reiterating, there is a call by the stakeholders to have the steering committee convened, and that is the process the government is working on. So that
Thank you.
we do not come back and say the government. But a serious call to make, there must be a consideration. Government does not have unlimited resources. One of the engagements we must have at the back end is to say, how do we deal with the dual illumination cost? Okay. So it should also be part of that proposal if there is that element of further delay on the analog switch off.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Fhatuwani. I do think that's a fair point about the cost of dual illumination, and that is certainly something that we do need to look at. But I also, just for the record, want to say at no point were we ever consulted by the minister when she issued that diktat of the analog switch off. There was zero consultation, and I venture to say that was decided by the Department of Communication. It was gazetted. We were given an opportunity to reply to that, and in our reply to the Gazette, we objected vociferously to the analog switch off for the very same reasons that we are expressing here today. Uyanda.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think I do support the idea of a steering committee, and I think it should involve civil society, because often conversations happen with, broadcasters. I think, civil society plays an important role, and we should be included in those conversations. But I think, one solution really is just transparency. Be transparent, not only with, broadcasters, but with the people of South Africa, the ones that are going to be impacted. Because I think what we've also picked up is that the department will, be transparent about numbers only in the parliamentary, meetings where, they are obviously accountable. But I think, it shouldn't be the only platform. People need to have access to that information so that they know how they are impacted. But I think one of the immediate solutions is the campaign that as SAS we're running, which is Save Free TV campaign. And I'm going to ask Lerato, my colleague, to please distribute the flyers. As I speak, this is a campaign that calls upon every society and member in South Africa to really take a part. It allows organizations, to endorse this particular campaign. And I think get in touch with me if you want to endorse as an organization. But it also allows citizens to be able to, use that QR code that's on those leaflets to then, sign the petition, because I think we need to demonstrate to government that, we've got a solid and a collective voice to call for this, moratorium on the analog switch off. And I think they really need to be alive to the impact that it's going to have on the industry, on broadcasters, but on the public as a whole. Thank you.
Very briefly.
Thanks.
I know there are two questions I really want to go to.
Yes, I think the solution, I think we need industry to lead the process now. Government needs to stick to the business of governing. We need policy. That's what government's job is. We've been waiting for many years for this policy process to come to an end. If we spend our resources rather on developing policy than running projects, I think we'd be a lot happier to get this process going.
Thank you very much. Two questions, yes. You're going to have to yell. Do we have a roving
There's
mic?
a mic here.
Sorry, can we start on this side?
Mike, firstly, it's not a question, it's a point of correction. All the SABC channels, 1, 2, and 3, and I think sports are on
You're
the
right.
OpenView
Hold it
platform.
closer.
Yes.
Are on the OpenView platform.
Yes, you're right.
Secondly, Fhatuwani, and I'm sure you know you're going to be in the line of fire here. A couple of points of correction. The one is that when there was an agreement on switch off, it was held only with SABC and ETV, community broadcasters, as Karen said, were not involved. But that was not an absolute agreement. There was an agreement to vacate above 694. But the agreement to vacate below 694 had certain conditions attached to it. And those conditions related to, for example, the installation of a certain number of set-top boxes. Notwithstanding that, ASO was announced. If we look at the fact that there are in excess of 4 million set-top boxes which will still need to be installed, and of course not all of them are the government's responsibility. Some of them have to be sourced commercially. Even those earning 4,400 won't be able to buy them either, but there has to be some cutoff point. I've done a rough and ready calculation on the basis of about 8 installations a day, which I think is ambitious, given that some of them are in the rural areas. It's going to take 5,000 installers. Now we know that is not possible. And we also know that notwithstanding the DOC's good intention, they have failed miserably in the process of installing the set-top boxes, in the registration process, in advertising, and they've lost the litigation already, which says, well, it's all premature. You haven't fulfilled your own mandate in terms of installations. So bearing that in mind, and bearing that in the 5 provinces where you have switched off, and I think Dimitri showed the graph, only SABC was switched off, and its audiences have plummeted. So those people all don't have access to television. Come 1 January, there'll be 16 million people. That's over 25% of the population, which will wake up and not have access to news, to current affairs, to entertainment. And those are the poorest of the poor. Those are the people who cannot afford subscription broadcasting. And there'll no doubt be an outcry. But having said that, and knowing that interference in 2015, it's not really an issue. For the most part, South Africa has no neighboring countries, and where they do on the borders, interference is not going to be an issue. And taking into account that there are no new technologies, isn't it time for the government to acknowledge, A, that DTT has been a dismal failure, but secondly, that ASO, the switch-off date, cannot happen on 31 December. It's physically impossible. It will put businesses out of business. It will deprive members of the population who have a constitutional right, Section 16, to receive information. It will deprive that of their constitutional right. There will be costly litigation. Isn't it time, and are the government considering, in view of that, that actually 31 December cannot happen anymore?
Thank you. Can we take the other question? Thank you.
You also say, like, really sort of sad, disgusting, and really disappointing to hear the same things. I'm a journalist. I've covered it for 15 years. You still hear from the government that we now realize there's a problem because people don't have a street address. We've heard that from the government for 20 years, and the same sort of solutions which you saw is not working. So my question is just, if the switch off doesn't happen at the end of the year, is there kind of a new time frame that anyone might have in terms of, like, do you want it to be postponed? Obviously not indefinitely, but would it be another year, another 6 months? What would be the time frame?
Fhatuwani, you're still in the hot seat, I'm afraid.
I think I have made it clear from the engagement. If there are any other stakeholders that were omitted from the engagement, I have made indication here. There is a call for the steering committees to indicate that they want to be involved in the steering committee. There's commitment by government to engage with stakeholders. And that is what even the executive authority are aligned to. The current gazetted switch off is December 2024. And the engagement, that determination of moving the switch off date will be dealt with through the steering committee submissions, as you heard the broadcaster saying. So that is the prerogative of the minister. I should make mention of that. You are correct to say there is a condition that registered households have to be installed. And I have indicated here that we are dealing with data of people that have registered, because we want to make sure that we are not duplicating installations, we are not duplicating registrations so we are doing that filtering of data. And the Centec has started through an industry-based approach, getting decoders and installing them, whether at a higher rate or not. But there is an agreement that only when we reach 90% of the registered households by the licenses which are broadcasters, transmitters will be switched off. If there's any engagement beyond that, it requires this steering committee that we are referring to. Government is committed to ensure that households that have to benefit from the program benefits. It has made commitment that all registered households will be dealt with. They have made commitment and made provision of resources. These broadcasters here, they are funded to do that work, and by government. We are also funding dual illumination as government. And whenever we receive numbers, we are connecting. We are not going to do against what was agreed, that a particular threshold, only when a particular threshold is achieved, transmitters will be switched off. And we do not authorize the switch off of the transmitters. It's done through the broadcasters themselves. They are the ones who say you can switch off this transmitter because you have satisfied the demands and expectations of the agreement we have reached.
Thanks, Fhatuwani. Last word, Uyanda. Thank you. Uyanda.
That's what I call holding government to account. I hope this meeting is recorded. Um, but I think, yeah, I think even if this particular postponement happens, because what we've seen with government is that they will move it, but then there will be no work that is being done. So I think to answer your question, I think, it should be indefinite until some of these important conditions are met. And I think what we want as civil society is for 85% of people to be connected to digital television, because if the overwhelming majority is connected, then we can be able to move forward together. Because, contrary to the slogan, of the campaign, the Go Digital campaign that government uses is leave no one behind, yet we're moving to switch off, leaving the majority of people behind. So I think the other thing that's really important to us is to ensure that there are commercial set-top boxes, that the missing middle is catered for. People know in time and are able to budget for those commercial set-top boxes. And I think those are the two things. The last one is issues, a conversation around issues relating to the sustainability of this, because it's going to be very costly for broadcasters. I think Mike spoke about a 2,000 increase to actually pay Centec for the digital transmitters. And I think there needs to be a conversation that's held around that, just to ensure that broadcasters really don't suffer at the expense of this migration.
Thank you very much. We've had a very robust conversation here today, a very necessary conversation. I think as much as we've challenged each other, I am feeling more optimistic that Fhatuwani has committed to consultation with the affected parties and committed to bringing civil society voices into that conversation. So I think we would very much welcome that there's no top-down diktat like we've seen in the past, where we haven't been consulted around these issues. And I'm really hoping that the government and Centec and the broadcasters can really work together in the interests of the public interest to see a successful broadcast digital migration. I think we all recognize that it has to happen, but it has to happen properly. So thank you very much for all of you who attended today, and I hope we carry on this conversation because there's still a lot to be discussed. Thank you.